Hey everybody, it's Joe Cioffi. Here we are at a little after midnight Eastern time. Just took me a while to get everything set up. Hope you're having a great night. We are seeing some history tonight in the weather world with this Category 4 hurricane, Hurricane Harvey, now moving inland. It came in as a Category 4 hurricane. Top winds were at least 130 miles an hour, and the Air Force reconnaissance aircraft actually found 130 knot flight level winds right before landfall just to the northeast of the eye, and the pressure dropped to 938 millibars. That was the last reading that we saw, and we are now going to wait and see what it does. Models continue to bring it down to a crawl. It has slowed down. It's only moving now at about 6 knots. And it's going to come to a grinding halt and do some kind of loop, and maybe it'll come back out into the Gulf of Mexico in a couple of days. In the meantime, this is going to be so different from other ones, other tropical systems that usually go in and weaken, in that it is the center is going to be very close to the coast, and a large part of the circulation is going to remain over the Gulf of Mexico. So as a result, this is going to be very, very slow to weaken. It's going to produce hurricane force winds for much longer than a storm like this normally would, and it may maintain tropical storm strength into the early part of next week, with the center either near the coast or just off. Some of the models tonight actually want to bring it off the coast. We also are going to watch the system over Florida, which I'll show you the new NAM and the GFS. They're a little more tucked in toward the Carolinas. It might mean for some rain and wind there if the system develops. We're going to have to see how tropical it gets, but it's going to be interesting to watch, and you'll see the upper air is going to be the key to this. We were talking about that earlier today, with the structure of this next trough that's coming down and around. So let me get that going, and just stand by. Okay, here we go. Well, we haven't seen something like this in many, many years. It's been since 2005 that a major hurricane made landfall in Texas with Hurricane Rita, and Hurricane Wilma shortly after that was the last time we had a Category 4 hit land, and since a major hurricane come inland in the United States. So it's been 12 years, and look at the spectacular eye. We actually had this deepened down to 938 millibars, the recon found before landfall, with winds in excess of 130 knots at flight level. This was quite the hurricane indeed, moving inland between Port Aransas, Port Aransas and Port O'Connor, right on the coast there. You can see it, the eye, moving inland now, and still pretty well intact. This has got a very, very strong circulation. It has slowed down. It's only moving at about 6 knots. And it's going to slow down even more once it gets just a little bit further inland. And then after that is the big question. Certainly the big rains are going to occur, and this thing is going to mill around for quite a while. I'm going to show you the Corpus Christi radar, showing you the well-defined eye right there coming on shore. And I saw wind gusts over 100 miles an hour on the coast. Just absolutely incredible, up and down the coast from Corpus Christi on northeastward through Port Aransas. There were even some gusts to 50 up as far north as near Galveston on the northern end of here, just offshore. I mean, it was just the wind field was just incredible to see all these wind gusts in the 30 to 40 mile an hour range as far north and east. So the circulation of Harvey really encompassing a very, very large area. So now we're just going to wait again for that rain to materialize. Here's the Hurricane Center's official forecast. Let me update this for you. This was from earlier, so it's hard to even figure out, exactly how this thing tracks. But it's here, then kind of loops around. They're bringing it back toward the coast, and then just inland again. It takes a long time to make this turn. It's this last position here is 7 p.m. Wednesday, so that's 5 days from now. So you can imagine all the rain that's going to fall in this part of Texas here. 20 inches plus, certainly doable. Here's the last recon mission that happened as the eye was moving inland, and right in there, it's hard to see. There's another pressure underneath that. It's the 938. And again, those 130 knot plus winds at flight level just to the northeast of Corpus Christi. So it'll be certainly fascinating to see what the wind damage result from all this in the morning when we start to get when we get daylight pictures of what occurred in this area as the eye moved inland. Here's the water vapor imagery, just real fast. We're going to start. We're not only going to continue to focus our attention on what Harvey's going to do in the next few days, but we're going to start looking at the system over Florida a bit more. Right now, the expanding outflow from Harvey is impacting that. You can see how the moisture is moving pretty much from north to south across Florida. A lot of tropical moisture there to deal with. And let's give you the visible shot here. And which goes over to an infrared. And there's a lot of convection here, a lot of showers and thunderstorms that have developed, and somewhere right in this area we're probably going to see a low center form. So let's look at the NAM, and let me get a little bit closer here. Okay, so here we go. And we'll have the GFS out far enough so we can watch Harvey on the NAM. First, let's focus our attention on Harvey. It goes inland. The new NAM just sits it there, and then as this is Sunday, we're at Sunday evening, Monday morning. It does bring it back out over the water during Monday, and then just sits it there off the Texas coast. So we'll have to see if that's what that track is. It's a little different from what the other models are doing. Now let's take a look at what's going on with the system, the old 92L over Florida, because you got that frontal boundary that's off the southeast coast, and low pressure forms here on Sunday, moves off the Florida coast, and then it starts to move northeastward just off the coast of South, and actually moves a low right on Wilmington, North Carolina, with rain on into the Delmarva Peninsula. Has the high pin to the north. There's a pressure gradient that develops here. This is going to be interesting to see if models are going in a slightly different direction tonight. And the big key to all this is this diving upper low that's coming down right here. Here's Harvey that's getting missed by it. Here's the Atlantic system. And if you remember from earlier when we were talking about this, it was a question of whether this would phase, or would it stay separate? Because if it phases, then we're going to have problems with this system coming up from Florida. So we'll take that off, and you can see that the NAM actually wants to try and have a bit of a phase here. This is something that the Canadian model has been doing for days, and I know I've been kind of bashing the Canadian model. I still will hold to the premise that if it winds up being right, it would be on the order of a broken clock being right twice a day. It's hard to use a model like that as a tool when every single run for the last I don't know how many weeks it keeps bringing the storms up the East Coast and wiping it out. And then suddenly, if you do if you do that every day, eventually you are going to get something right. But the NAM certainly suggests that we need to be cautious here with regards to this, because if this phasing does occur, that's going to bring that system up closer to the coast. It may still wind up tracking offshore, but maybe instead of going way out, which is what the European did earlier, it might be a little further tucked in. But let's see if the GFS is out far enough, and it's not quite there. Now here's the GFS. It's hard to find where the system, the southeast system, is here. Here is Harvey. So why don't we put the precip on, and that'll help. And even the GFS. All right, so let's look at Harvey. It goes in. The low actually not that different from the NAM. And now here's the coastal low for Florida. Off the Florida East Coast, it's much more tucked into the west. But once it reaches North Carolina, it still wants to kick it out more to the northeast and not taking it up northeast up the coast. So it would suggest when we look at the upper air, we can match the upper air up. So I have 84 hours. Let's see if we have 84 hours on the upper air. Yeah, see, here's the thing. After 84 hours on the GFS, this system, rather than getting and remaining dynamic, starts to get squashed a bit. Here's your system that's off the Carolinas. So this type of upper air look would suggest that would go out northeast and offshore. We would need to see the upper air. Let me just give you a different color here. You know, this would have to be more like this in order for this ocean, the system off the southeast coast to move more northward. It's probably a little. Let's compare it to the prior run. Actually, I'll go back 2 runs. All right, so this is the run from the day to Friday early, late morning. Okay, and here is the upper air from this afternoon, which is very flat. And now here is the new run. And you can see this is more developed on this run. It was too flat on the last run, but it still would imply that system would head out to the east. Here are the hurricane model tracks for whatever winds up happening there, and they're all offshore, and they all track it out to the northeast. And here's the model track guidance with this. A number of the models do strengthen this to tropical storm strength, and a few of them get it up to 45 to 55 knots. But it doesn't go much beyond that. Okay, so that's probably, I'm going to just stop it here, and we'll come back tomorrow afternoon. We'll look at what all the models are doing with all this. In the meantime, let's give one last look to the radar as the hurricane moves inland and is now starting to slow down, and we'll leave you. I'll give you a fresh. That's still the latest. Okay, I figured I'd come back. So just hang on one second. And I think the audio. Okay, I figured I'd come back. So just hang on one second. And I think now I got my audio all set. Okay, so just a couple of things. Let me just point out, I'm just looking at some of the observations, the wind observations in the last hour. A 92 knot wind gust near Port Aransas, which was the peak gust. They're still getting gusts to almost 70 miles an hour down near Corpus Christi, right along the coast. Just inland, there are gusts into the mid-50s. You go northeast of Port Aransas toward Port O'Connor and Freeport, gusts to 40 there. Near Port O'Connor, gusts to 51. I'm trying to just read the geography on the map, and we get, closer to Galveston Bay. In Houston, Houston is winds, and even in Houston, winds are gusting 20 to 30 miles an hour, and down near the coast, still gusting up to 50 miles an hour. So again, just to emphasize how extensive the wind field is, to be experiencing gusty winds that far north. Just really, this is a very this is an incredible storm, and I imagine that we will not have another Hurricane Harvey, that they'll retire the name. So again, we'll have the next live stream sometime later Saturday afternoon, and maybe toward the late afternoon, as we'll start to look at what's going on with the system over Florida, and of course we'll continue to watch Harvey, because that's going to be a player into next week. And by the way, I was just looking at the GFS, which on Friday still has an identifiable surface low sitting south of Dallas with rain in East Texas, and in fact it still has rain there at least into Saturday. That's as far out as we have. And for those of you in my neck of the woods in the Northeast, we have a cold front that will be coming through here on Thursday with some showers and maybe a thunderstorm, and then another high builds down from the north. So it looks like, if this is right, the start of the Labor Day holiday weekend looks pretty good. And let me just take a look. The GFS late this afternoon was trying to bring another system out. It does have a weak system crossing the tropical Atlantic, but as we showed you earlier today with the big upper low that's sitting out in the middle of the Atlantic, it might be problematic for systems to develop until they get if they get west of 60 degrees west. All right, folks, I gotta go. I gotta get up at 5 a.m. to do some fishing here. So we'll see you tomorrow. Thanks for being here tonight. And tomorrow at late afternoon, we'll do a nice long one, and we can sit around afterward and chat away.